The pandemic brought the education system of the world to a halt. In a world which was already zooming into modern technology, the global lockdowns left the nations with online education as the only solution to counter this roadblock. Just the idea of online education was not going to suffice, but the process of its implementation was going to be the key factor deciding its success. A large part of the developing world's population lives in rural areas. Of the world's total population of 7.6 billion, 3.4 billion live in rural areas. 26.4% of this forms the rural Indian population, which is 66% of the country's total population. The developing countries have a bigger challenge, with the number of government schools being 3.3 times the number of private schools and the number of students in government schools being 1.5 times the number of students in private schools in India. Most of this majority does not even have access to a smartphone in the name of basic technology needed to be able to attend the online classes. This situation has already pushed them with a one-year setback when compared with the students around the rest of the world. On the other hand, there are students for whom the domain of technology in online education has witnessed a substantial growth in terms of quality, engagement, and accessibility. But the reality is also that online education has been a bit of a failure. It does not engage enough. It puts kids to sleep. Students and parents have been complaining widely about its ability to educate. But then there have been efforts by more interactive forms of online education. Companies have tried to integrate building DIY projects for better learning. Needless to say, India does face major issues in delivering these amenities to the majority of students. Yet, for the section of students who are able to access it, the industry is showing substantial growth. Richa Sarod Dalal, Democracy News Live, New Delhi.
Online education with offline students. Through the pandemic, we've seen that students going away from the interactive schooling have had to sit in front of screens such as these two flat D screens and not have access to the interactivity that a school should provide, a college should provide. It's not easy when you actually are just looking at a screen all day long, doing your homework on it, interacting with your teachers, interacting with other students on it. It becomes a very, very boring existence. I've seen many students complain about it. So we decided, let's talk a bit about what this online education means today, because this is not ending anytime soon. It's going to continue going on for a few more months. And then speak to some people on the outside who've decided that it's time to innovate. It's time to not be stuck with a flat 2D screen where you're telling people 2 plus 2 is 4 or whatever, however high the level of the calculation of your math is. But take this to a newer level. Make education for what it really needs to be. Interactive, has technology, has some do-it-yourself tools, and breaking away from what was in the past. Because honestly, education in the past has failed the world at many, many levels. India has produced multiple amount of engineers, a large section of engineers, and most of them are unhireable. So certainly something completely wrong with the education system. And that is something that needs to be fixed as soon as possible. Now, first, let me start this show with the students, but let me introduce the guests for the show today. We have 3 students joining us. Pranav Choudhury, he's a class 12 student. He's from Calcutta. Also joining us is Ekansh Agrawal, the class 9 student, studies at Shiv Nadar School in Noida. And Dhaani Gupta, she's also a class 9 student studying at Shiv Nadar School in Noida. Also joining us today on the show is Pallavi Agarwal. She's the Executive Director of Atlantis Erudition and Travel Services. And what they do is they have innovated on technology to try and make education interactive. It shouldn't just be, flat 2D screen. They are sending materials to students where they can actually build and create and then go along with it. Also joining us is Kanak Mukherji. He's a teacher of political science and sociology. He's based in Calcutta at the Lakshmipat Singhania Academy. Also joining us is Vinita Sharat. She's the coordinator STEAM at Shiv Nadar School, Noida. So let me start by first bringing in the students here. Pranav, why don't you go at it first? Explain to me what has been your experience with online education.
So, for me, online classes were a bit of a roller coaster ride for the past couple of months because we started out in a situation wherein we had never been accustomed to or even acquainted to a system of education which could be beyond or outside schools. But in the last couple of months, and I believe I can speak for all the students in my school, our school set up a really brilliant online education infrastructure. And while that can never parallel or even come close to the traditional classroom schooling, I believe that in some aspects we have had convenience insofar as online education is concerned. And I think the way to go ahead, and also one of my experiences for the past many months, is that the way to go ahead is a blend of both online and offline education, because when it comes to online education there are also many advantages that it offers. Like, of course, the intimacy is gone, and the interaction is gone in classes, but it also offers a wide range of benefits and advantages that I think once, and I'm hoping that it happens very soon, we go back to schools and we start our traditional classroom learning. If we can incorporate these good points from our 1 year experience, then I think we can have a better setup for education insofar as a digital aspect to education is concerned.
Dhani, let me bring you in here. Tell me a little about your experience on, the online education.
I mean, there were obviously some challenges because it's a new platform, and studying online is never easy. But it was nice because if I were to bring an example in, uh, submitting homework is quite easier because there's less of a scope for file misplacement and stuff like that. So it's easier when you need to like recall where you kept all of the assignments and everything like that. But it obviously can't compare to real classes. Real classes have their own um,
Go for it, no problem. So, does this happen when you're doing your class as well? Do people in the background talk, and does it kind of things like this happen? Is it a challenge?
yeah, my parents are working from home, so they have calls and everything, and sometimes when they're talking to their colleagues, it gets a little difficult to interact with with my teachers.
There have been the children I've met, and maybe your experiences are different, but I've met many of the students who said, I am so sleepy when I've been sitting in front of a computer for hours. Sometimes it's
I
so bad that
Yeah.
I pass out. Is
Well,
it
I
true?
haven't passed out yet, but I can agree. It's tiring. I mean, you would think sitting in one place would make it easier to kind of for energy management, but it actually is so tiring. After even 2 or 3 hours of classes, it just feels like I'm done with staring at the screen. I need a break.
Akansh, let me bring you in here. Akansh is a grade 9 student. Tell me what's
Yes,
been
so
your experience with online education?
so for me, online classes have a new experience, completely new experience. So like this year, I had joined Shivnada school like a year back, and this year all our classes got shuffled and a new form of education came to the table. So for me personally, it became like a new way of like learning because I hadn't done this in the past before. So for coping up with this became extremely difficult, but in the end, we did reach there.
Is it really interesting and happy, or would it have been better to
In
be in a classroom?
comparison to like physical classes, like some experiences cannot be replaced by online classes. For example, the peer interaction that we have with our friends, we play with them, we eat with them, we even study with them physically. That experience cannot be replaced by anything in the world. However, it has online education does have its benefits, like it saves us the time for going to school, the time for rotating between classes. But on the other hand, it also makes the classes very monotonous, sitting and staring at a screen and learning all the things that we would could have been learning in a more fun and educative way.
Staring at a screen all day can be very, very challenging at many levels. Even some of us, for example, I'm a journalist. I'm out used to going out and existing and doing my storytelling. We still have done it. We've traveled through, but imagine the online journalist, which basically are constantly scraping material, plagiarizing all the content from different places and putting it online. It could be a very demeaning experience. I met many young journalists who've been hired by news organizations that hire them for the plagiarism that they do, and then they come back and say, "This is not why I got educated. This is not why I went to school to learn. If it's going to be all offline or it's going to be all online and no physical online offline, I think the human interaction changes." One of my colleagues also came up and mentioned that these online jobs, which are held by engineers, create such a boring existence that it becomes a very, very boring life, and they lose basic skill sets of interacting. Let me bring in the teachers here now, and then also Pallavi, who's been at the forefront of innovating. Vinita, Sharat, you're a coordinator at STEAM for Shiv Nadar School. Explain to me, as this journey of going from a really good, solid, interactive school, because your school certainly has stood in the forefront of all of this, and then going to this online mode. Explain to me how challenging it's been, and what your experience is with it.
Um, See, we stay in Delhi NCR, and every year this smog problem or something, it happened when schools are closed. Many times, I had been given a duty and I have to go away from school, and then the classes sometimes get hampered. So, keeping all this in mind, I was practicing online beforehand, and I never had no one put substitution for my class, even when I'm not in Delhi NCR or in Noida. So it was not difficult for me because I was practicing. And Yeah, but when I talk about the mass, when I talk about my school, yeah, there was change, and the teachers' mindset also changed very quickly, because the school has supported with all gadgets. So this way, we are very lucky that till grade 8, kids are having their personal iPad, and all the softwares were available and provided by the school. So, the shift or change, what you say, obviously it was there, because you can't compare when you are physically present in class. But it took very quickly in my school, and we didn't take much time to shift to online teaching. Having said that, yeah, we are learning each day. We are improvising things, like Dhani said, that sitting in front of laptop for 2 3 hours, together, the kids get tired. So we are changing our pedagogy of, and we are bringing in asynchronous, synchronous classrooms, etc. Thank you.
Uh, Let me bring in Mr. Mukherji. Kanak, explain to me what has been your experience with online education. Let's start there.
I would say it is a very happy experience because, firstly, we are forgetting something, that is, school is not only for studies. School is for so many other things. Children go to school, they interact with their friends, like the mm, the other panelists said, that peer interaction, that is very important. Then punctuality and all the other things that this one. Over here, you find the teacher coming into the class, but the students might be joining after some time and you have to wait for it. So where is the punctuality? Where is the this thing gone? So it is not only classes, it is not only teaching that we do in school. We do so many other things. They play, they share, they learn through so many other interactions. So those things are missing. So if we are saying that online classes are online classes, fine, it is all right because we are making the best of a very bad situation which is prevailing, that is a pandemic situation. But the earlier we go back to our setup, the better. I feel so. And
Hmm.
uh, according to yesterday's newspaper, if you see, the New York City, they are saying that open the schools, close the bars. That is so important. Like you have to open the schools because otherwise a whole generation will be impaired. That's what I feel. Like we have to
I
open our
I
schools as
I
soon as
couldn't
possible.
agree. I couldn't agree with you more, Kanak, on with the statement that you made. Uh, Open the schools and close the bar. I mean, there may be a lot of people who may not want that, but that's another story. One of the things I learned, I was interacting with a group, and we've been talking about it for a while. uh, uh, Schools in around Europe and around the United States, some decent schools, who were, districts where they could actually afford it. They're wearing something which I wear as well, and I'm going to show it to you. It's a COVID watch. They said use these watches for making sure there is a panel where we can see every kid's health before they even come to school, so that we know if there is any kid who is possibly has some medical issues. Also, it gives you contact tracing and gives you social distancing. It buzzes when there is social distancing is breached. So certainly ways around it, and we will come to that when it finally gets down to schooling and how cautious we need to be in the beginning as we move forward. I know a lot of people will not take the technology route, but I think this is the future, not just for this, but there are going to be many, many viruses as we move forward. This is one pandemic that we've seen, but this is not ending so anytime soon. Now, let me go back to Pallavi. Pallavi, your company has kind of innovated. When we see you saw a gap in what was happening on the ground. You were seeing students literally fall asleep on their computers as they were being taught, because how long can you sit in front of a computer? Explain to me a bit what you guys decided to do and how well it's worked so far.
So I have a nephew who is 3 years old who is close to 4 years old, and I have another nephew who is 8 years old. So when I started speaking to my cousin sisters and brothers and the kids, we realized that they are really facing a tough time watching those videos because they have to watch it all the time. And after an hour, the 4-year-old kid would say, "Mama, I am so bored of these classes. I am going away. You please mark my attendance. So you sit on the screen, turn off the camera, and you take the attendance for me." So this is what the kids in my house have been doing. And the moment we realized it, we started doing online challenges for students wherein they do something with their hands. Because when they are trying to use their brain, implement something, which they can think of without going onto the computer screen. So that would be something which is interesting for them. So we launched a few challenges in April, and then we did something in August wherein we sent them the astronomy kits which had clay modeling and everything. And then the students started enjoying what they were doing. So apart from the online classes, they were having some fun activities while at home, when not a lot of parents interaction was also there. So the parents also could get some free time from their students, from their children, while they have to be online available all the time with them. So this is something we did. And then later, when we did a lot of R&D, we tied up with a company in Europe. They have been designing auto named robots which come in 4 or 5 different modules. So we thought of bringing those robots to India so that the students who have just been busy on in online education, they can at least do something new. And while they are on the computer screens, they still have a robot in hands to make it of their own.
Like as ma'am said, robots like
To the
Tied up with a company in Europe. They have been designing auto named robots which come in 4 or 5 different modules. So we thought of bringing those robots to India so that the students who have just been busy on in online education, they can at least do something new. And while they are on the computer screens, they still have a robot in hands to make it of their own. And those robots are affordable. So, it's something which is students have in hand, they're doing it themselves, and they're still learning. So it is not something, which they have to go out, spend time with people, and get affected in this pandemic. So this is something that we thought would be a good idea.
Absolutely. So let's listen in from the students. Let me go to Dhani here. Dhani, if you can tell me something like this, do you think, tools like these can actually make education more fun?
In online classes, yes, because if we have something to occupy ourselves with instead of just looking at the screen and listening to the teacher or whoever is teaching, I mean, it would feel a little more like physical classes, and it would also kind of help us, you know, um, engage with the whole concept better.
The others, Ekansh, do you want to take this and tell us what you feel about it? Ekansh?
You can hear me?
Yes, Ekansh, I can.
So, like having like as ma'am said, robots like during our classes, it would really like make the education experience more enjoyable for us rather than just sitting in one place and just looking at a blank screen with like in most cases for like sciences, like just like sentences and numbers just written and we have to copy them down so that we can remember them. So like having
Right.
more like interactive education processes will truly make the system much more better for us.
Let me go to Vinita Sharat here. Vinita, are there more products and tools like these where students can play with it and then the learning experience can be more interactive? Because just sitting in one place, as we've heard from many students, maybe a challenge. So what Pallavi and her company offer is one of the things. Are there more tools like this which we need to know about? Do students need to know about? Do schools need to know about?
Yes, there are tools which make learning more easy. And, I remember my teacher used to say that we teach, physics like simple pendulum or, those things with chalk and board, and it is in pictures are given in textbook. And how children will understand, because what we teach is actually is a 3D thing. So if you go to town tower and you see the pendulum clock, it's a 3D. Whereas we are teaching same concept on chalk and board. So uh, that always is there in my mind when I teach. I do agree with Pallavi and other people who are making such tools. It really helps understand the concept in a better way. There's a company who is making a periodic table card. So the way the children play card, 56 in number, and then the whole periodic table they can learn by playing card, like lithium, and then they exchange with hydrogen. They have to combine with oxygen like that. So these tools are available in market, and yes, they do help in making a concept more easy to understand and to give the learner a way of like a fun way method of learning. There are many tools. Other tools are also there, and there are some rocket thing which is coming up, which is based on Newton's third law, and so many concepts like momentum and all can be explained with that. So I do agree that these tools really help students to understand the concept better way. Thank you.
What we are discussing here today, and I wanted to kind of lay emphasis on it for the audience and the people interacting here today, is online education cannot be a two flat T screen anymore. 2D screens are great, but they have limited. Augmented reality, virtual reality need to be a part of it. Schools will have to understand that there has to be a journey beyond the 2D screen. Augmented reality, virtual reality are all possible where students can actually begin interacting. They may have studios. If you can actually spend tens of thousands of dollars, paying to a school, you can certainly create a small virtual studio to interact, which may cost you $200 or $300, which may be 10,000-15,000 rupees. And each student can then interact with the tools going forward. And being able to do something with your own hands, being able to build things, is where education needs to get to. And I think that's a journey which many need to take beyond just, the 2D, the two-dimensional class. Pranav, you're based in Calcutta. Has your experience with any of the online schooling been in line with the physical interactivity with tools and products where the education then seemed a little more fun?
In my school, I mean, obviously, one of the major things that comes in our way in online education is a lack of participation and rather lack of motivation to participate. Because when there are experiments happening in front of, especially in science classes up until class 10, then we would actually see them firsthand. We would see how the chemicals would react. Say, for example, if I take the example of chemistry, and I think that that is a major barrier because now that we're not there interacting with the experiments themselves, the motivation to actually get up and the motivation to participate in class reduces a lot. So I think what our school also has been doing, they're trying their best to have an interactive element in the classes, but there's only so much you can do without actually being physically present. So I think using online tools, so say for example, the other panelists also mentioned this, online tools which make the class more interactive. For example, even the robots thing that was brought up, they just give the students a little more incentive to participate. So say for example, if I was interacting with such a software or such a device, then I would be more motivated to participate in class, which is why in absence of physical schooling and the traditional classroom schooling, I believe that these online apparatuses and technology can play a huge role in actually making classes more interesting and having more motivation in the students to actually participate in the classes.
I'm going to now take this discussion in a direction which is on the other side. You all three students come from schools which are phenomenal schools, very well funded. You have great access to technology, whatever, whether it was an online robot, whether it was computers, laptops, tablets, your families can afford it. But a large part of the developing world lives in poverty. Forget, having tools such as cell phones, data networks. They don't even have food sometimes. They go for their midday meals to schools. Now, those students have suffered through this pandemic. They have been left behind through this period of the pandemic, and the pandemic isn't over yet. Where do they go? Will the students who come from a little creamy layer, will they go ahead and actually they would have gained even more during the pandemic and left the same group of students who were in rural India or who didn't have access to technology or were poor and couldn't afford it? Will they be left behind is the question I want to ask the teachers. Mr. Mukherji, do you want to take that? Can you give me a little sense on you as teachers? Have you thought about this journey for developing countries and, in your context, India for that matter?
See, when you talk about robots in school, when you talk about computers and tablets in school, and then obviously you're making it a very exclusivist experience. Whereas in India or in the developing world, it is absolutely necessary that we make it mass-based so that we can engage the children. You are very correct in the sense that children go to school for their midday meal scheme. I have been to a remote school in Bengal where once they have got, it was a Saturday, once they got their egg curry and rice, they all went away home. They went away home. Means that was the end of the day. Means they have had their food, and that was the the day was over, sort of. So if we go for these exclusivism, then I'm sorry to say, but we are going to bring in a lot more challenges in the future, you know. But whereas if the children are going to go to school and they can innovate with their teachers some way or the other, but we have to make education for all. That is for sure, 100%.
Inclusivity needs to be the order of the day. What we would have expected any government of a developing world to do is make sure that they give access to technology to students individually. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and even if it did, it's worth it. Also, availability of data for students who would be accessing that material should have been a given. In fact, government should have been ready even before the pandemic hit. It wasn't as if it was unknown that the pandemic is going to come. The world had alerted. There was enough information that the pandemic was about to hit this year. So certainly there was time for governments to react, but there was no plan in place. So it's been a big failure around governments. Vinita, do you want to address that as well? When you look at students in rural India, or students who have not had access to the beautiful online education schools such as yours and the Lakshmipat Singhania school, possibly, and many other good schools provide, what do you think should the plan be as we move forward, going still out of the pandemic?
See, I do agree with you all that mass stays in village, and we have to include everyone in the teaching learning process. So these schools and these children staying in a remote area where they don't have access to all these gadgets and all. Yes, I do agree that government should have done something. Yes, I do agree that government should do. But also, I strongly feel that for everything, obviously the government should do, but there should be some way or others that society also start taking charge of this. Because I know many organizations, like one of my students from my school, he has started an NGO called Mobile Uthao Padhai Shuru Karo, and he is getting a lot of money and he's buying lots of mobile and going to villages and giving to each and every child. Such initiative is also required. Yes, I do agree that this pandemic has created a rift in educational society, because when I talk about my school or Lakshmipat Singhania, that Calcutta school, they are different. But it's not very difficult to bridge the gap completely, but at least something should have been done. Something we all can think of and do actually. Government should do, yes, I do believe in this, but also the society, and you see the Agastya Foundation is also doing all these things. They are
Sure.
doing all this. So
So Vinita, I agree. So Vinita, let me now, make sure that, there is clarity around this idea. And I understand when a lot of people talk about that we as society have a responsibility, we do have a responsibility as a society. But here is what happens. For example, in the UK, if you say, instead of paying my tax, I'm going to take this money and give it to an NGO, which is a charity, it will be calculated as your tax. The government has to pay $1 for $1 that you pay. So let's say I said, instead of paying 2 lakhs in tax, I'm going to give 2 lakhs in charity to an NGO. The government will have to match that money, another 2 lakhs, and give it to that NGO to do the work. And that is how they keep NGOs honest, the NGOs audited, and NGOs that don't cheat. That seems to be missing. So there isn't enough money for people to give out. There isn't enough money for people to make sure that things get delivered. And that is where the challenge lies. There isn't a system in place where there is a system around it. So people can go ahead and start delivering money to organizations which will do it, but there isn't a proper system around how to manage it. So I think those are all parts of the system that still the government has to put in place. So we can expect society to build and the society to give beyond the taxes they already give, But that's not the only thing. That there has to be still a process around it. Let me go to the students here, and we will go towards the closure of the discussion after that. Let me start with you, Pranav. Tell me, what do you think about students in rural India? How could they have been supported better?
I think with all the benefits that online education has brought about, there is also a huge digital divide that has only widened with the coming of online education. Because, very frankly speaking, I am privileged enough to belong to a very creamy layer of society insofar as education is concerned. Because right from the start of the pandemic, we got all facilities. We got laptops from our parents, we got online teaching from our schools, we got internet, and this is not the case for a huge chunk of Indian population, even within my board as well. Which is why I think that this puts them at a huge disadvantage, and the government is taking steps for it. So, say for example, from what I read in the news, there is being the education is being broadcasted through radio, and in rural places where radio is perhaps the only way of mass communication, and even some newspapers. So I think here is where innovation comes in, because it is very easy to say that you will spread the digital infrastructure to rural areas, but it does not work that easily, right? There is huge funding required, there is a lot of time required for it. So in absence of that time, because people who are studying this year, people have to give boards like me a huge examination for their career. I think in such a situation, here is where the innovation comes in. So say for example, in my personal opinion, the idea of teaching students through radio was something that is absolutely brilliant. So this is a sort of innovation. So from the government side and also from the schools which do have this apparatus set up, if these schools help the rural schools to educate their students, and the government brings in such form of an innovation, then I think we can overcome this barrier, especially for students who have this year as their crucial year, who have their class 10 and class 12 examinations this year.
Dhaani, do you want to take that in terms of, do you think there is some responsibility of the larger society to partner, and obviously the government's responsibility in delivering education to the poor?
I agree. I mean, the society has and the government both have a huge role to play in all of this. The government and the society have to provide some the online infrastructure as well, and as Pranav, the other panelist, said, um, a lot of innovation is also required for people who aren't being provided with the online infrastructure as quickly. We need people volunteering to help people in these rural areas to kind of receive the education that they deserve and that they need.
So the reality of the day is education can be online or offline, but it has to be interactive. Education needs to be inclusive, whether it's online or offline. And this large divide that India has today, with rural India, poor, urban poor, and then a creamy layer of society which has access to great education, is a divide that needs to be cleaned out. Companies which innovate in products need to be pushed forward so that they actually can make education interesting. When it comes to people, experiential learning, which is with physical things, where whether they're creating robots, whether they're creating do-it-yourself devices, these are all things that need to be seen. And I think it needs to be an integral part of the system. There needs to be a system around it on how the CBSE, the Central Board of Secondary Education and Higher Education, is going to work. So I think there is tremendous amount of thinking that needs to be done. I want to thank all the panelists, Mr. Mukherji, Vinita, Pallavi, Ekansh, Dhaani, and Pranav. Thank you for joining us today. And I think it's a journey that we all need to make, and we need to stay alert on. Thank you for watching It Matters. Good night and good luck.